Heart disease is the #1 killer in this country, but doctors say it is largely preventable. Tonight, KLTV7's Landry Brady has the 8 rules shared by experts today at an East Texas forum to help people live longer and feel better.
#1 and the #4 causes of death in the United States are cardiovascular disease and stroke.
Cardiovascular issues are something far too many Americans have to face. However, despite the odds,
it is possible and desirable to live a long, healthy life.
That's what people in East Texas gathered to learn about at the Age Well Health Span Forum, hosted by the University of Texas at Tyler. Here, people heard from speakers on ways to live a longer and fulfilled life, and also tips to stay healthy.
So regardless of, steps in the day, as long as you're getting at least 7,000, that's the goal, then that is can lead to a healthy life.
But a big part of overall health starts with paying attention to the core of our bodies, our hearts. According to Eduardo Sanchez, Chief Medical Officer for the American Heart Association, heart health can be as simple as 8 steps.
Eating healthy, being physically active, getting a healthy amount of sleep every day, not smoking. Those 4 things are key.
The remaining 4 include being aware of your blood pressure, lipids, and sugar, as well as maintaining a healthy weight. And while the 8 keys to a healthy life are important, there's one more thing to keep in mind.
Curiosity is a thing that will extend people's lives as well.
Because it is never too late to become curious about your health.
We could do something about that whether we are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, or 90. It is never, ever, ever too late to start.
Use that curiosity to keep your heart aging well. Landry Brady, KLTV 7 News.
Now, doctors recommend people over the age of 40 start including a cardiovascular risk assessment with their annual checkups.